We are in the midst of a pandemic and we don't have a health minister. Well, we've got Martin Foley now is going to be taking over. Really, I mean, what is going on there? And the Premier has said that the buck stops with him. What does that mean in reality in Dan Andrews' world?
Rita, that's just the straightforward question that Victorians just want answered. You said it exactly right. The buck stops with that bloke. So, you know, when I lost an election, I took responsibility and went. When he had 750 people die under his watch, he blamed someone else. That's not leadership. That's cowardice. You know, this guy is a madman. He takes advice from no one. He clearly listens to no one, respects no one. He clearly thinks he's the smartest guy in the room and everyone else doesn't matter. That's why we've got the problem that we do. And this gang of eight that's supposedly running the state, I suspect they're more just an audience for Andrews for him to lecture them. Most of them are actually retiring at the next election, so they don't have vested interest in this themselves. You know, Lisa Neville, Mark Bakula, Tim Pallas, Mikakos is gone. So, you know, we have got a state where the Premier seems to be running the place like his own little fiefdom, and 5 million Melburnians, which is 1/5 of the country's population, stuck living in this hell for the last few months.
Well, Matthew, it's worse than just living in the hell. According to research done in the UK at the moment, we're talking about London here, or the UK, nearly 75,000 people, according to the latest research, could die from a second lockdown. That's what they're predicting. This is dying from the lockdown, not from COVID, and they're basing those figures on the 16,000 deaths that occurred during and are put down to the last lockdown in the UK. Lockdowns kill. They kill through depression, through suicide, through all sorts of people not turning up for the appointments they should have at doctors and so on. So how on earth is this government, your government there in Victoria, not being held accountable for the deaths that must be occurring due to the lockdown if international evidence is anything to go on?
That's a very good point, because the government down here recently passed industrial manslaughter laws that you'd have to think would now apply to government ministers, given that they were going to hold company secretaries and chairs account to the same standards. It must apply to those ministers. You would have thought so. You know, despite the Health Minister going yesterday and the Premier, you know, again blaming everyone but himself, we still don't have an example, an excuse, I should say, as to whose decision was it, the hotel quarantine. Despite the farce of the last 24 hours, whose decision was it?
James.
Very straightforward. Well, he should take responsibility, but he won't take responsibility.
So I'm wondering about the politics of this then. I'm looking at the resignation note that Jenny Mikakos put out yesterday, and I note that in the 5th and 6th paragraphs, there's a lot of language that suggests that this was not a voluntary decision and that there could be cracks appearing within the Andrews government. Do you think she will be the last minister to go, or do you think there could be more shoes to drop on this?
That's a very good question, because this guy, Daniel Andrews, rules his party with fear. And that's now what we've started to see during COVID, as to how he runs his party is now how he's running the state. And he seems to love authoritarianism just a bit too much. And I think many in the Labor Party are now thinking they are locked in a room with a madman and this guy ain't letting them out. And I think we can now see that as 6 million, 6.5, 7 million Victorians are thinking the same thing. You know, I look at the Herald Sun, and James Campbell from the Herald Sun always says, never give him the benefit of the doubt. It's always worse than it looks, and he always has to win. And that sums up his personality pretty well.
Well, Matthew, I just want to... Sorry, Rita. I just want to quickly... Rita, you go. Sorry, you go.
No, just on Mikakos going, it just reminded me of what happened to Jane Garrett when she tried to stand up to Dan Andrews with the CFA. Tell us about how he operates, and is it a coincidence that we've now had 2 women who have stepped down in fairly spectacular circumstances after falling out with the Premier?
You throw in Lucinda Nolan, the head of the Country Fire Authority as well. There's 3. You know, Rita, everyone can see this guy's modus operandi. I mean, he turns up looking like Lurch. He dictates to the world as to what he thinks we're all going to do, and then has the gall to say, well, why would anyone want to go out after 8 p.m. at night? I mean, pardon me? I mean, this is a free democracy with 7 million people. Well, I think he has a problem with anyone. I think he has a habit of bullying subordinates. And I think women, male, whatever, he just bullies people under him. And the guy is a bully. He's been a bully from the very start. You can see it in his behaviour. I've always thought that. I've seen that on him in Parliament. He leads a team which are pretty much sycophants to him. He's got enough in the media, the mainstream media, who think that kind of approach, they all live within 7 kilometres of the CBD of Melbourne, that they think that approach is somehow spectacularly good. But now what we're seeing during COVID, Rita, is that this is the most disastrous form of leadership that you could have in a crisis. If you stick a madman in charge of the place in the middle of a crisis, what we get is the worst public health catastrophe in Australia's history. If you'd said that 6 months ago, people would say, oh, no, Dan will be our saviour. What we see now is that kind of behaviour, that kind of nasty, insular, arrogant leadership has cost 700 plus people their lives and locked down a quarter of the nation's economy, and in Melbourne, a fifth of the nation's population, and it's having huge mental health impacts.
James.
So with those impacts, then, do you see any accountability for them at the next election? Is the Andrews government, you said the number of them are retiring at the next election, does the Andrews government still maintain enough support with the weird #IStandWithDan crowd to get over the line?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I'd say at this point, you raise mental health. Mental health is going to be the biggest issue, I think, coming out of this, as long as as well with the economy. I see it in my own children. They're primary school age kids, and it's hugely impacting them and their friends. There's still 2 and a bit years to go to the next state elections. There's still some way to go. But I think that what we're seeing is kind of the establishment of the grounds of the next election that will be around mental health and the economy. It won't be on the health challenge. Andrews wants to keep talking about health because every time the incumbent talks about health during a pandemic, the public backs them. It's just
I wonder for how much longer. We're seeing in the UK, for example, Matthew, people rebelling against, I'm not inciting anybody to disobey the law, but we're seeing in countries like the UK, party time when at the 10 o'clock curfew because people have had enough in that country and they don't see the logic of the laws. And I would suspect that in Victoria, there must be many, many people not only struggling with mental health, but struggling to understand the logic of it. Keep up the fight, Matthew Guy. Thanks so much for talking to us on Outsiders.